Welcome to WRAL's Triangle and Two podcast. I'm Brian Murphy, joined once again by former UNC quarterback Bryn Renner. And Bryn was on the call for a tremendous victory bell game against Duke. Duke comes out ahead 32-25, pulls off one of the best plays I've seen in a long time. A fake field goal attempt late in the fourth quarter that leads to the game-winning touchdown. And Bryn, you're a guy who you coached the field goal unit when you were at FIU. Tell me what you're thinking when you see them go out to line up for this, and maybe what Carolina could have done differently, or, hey, maybe sometimes you just tip your cap and say, Duke, that was a heck of a play.
Yeah, I coached at FIU with Butch Davis, and he was a special teams kind of wizard, and that was his thing. And so I coached the corners, and I know when we ran field goal block, it was always one of those things where if we had a rusher like Marcus Allen was doing on the outside, and attempting to block, you always had to have someone else come over the top and make sure the tight end was covered, or if there was a fake, you were doing your job. And I think on that one, when you look at the tape, Kamari House, I believe, was in charge of, kind of getting over there and being contained potentially. So I know whenever you take a risk like that and go for a block, it's going to be kind of costly if someone doesn't do their job on the other end. And I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but that's what it looked like. But, you have to take risks in those games, and Duke came out and had a great plan and executed a fake field goal that we'll remember for a while. I know I will, in a critical time of the moment where Carolina might have had the momentum, and Duke took it right back with their execution. And in those type of rivalry games, that's what you have to have, is that type of discipline to execute a fake in that moment. So great call by Coach Diaz.
That's something, right, as a coach, tell me, you've had in your game plan. Manny Diaz said they've been working on that play for a month and a half. You've worked on it, and you're just waiting for the right time to break something like that out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the fun part of football, honestly, is when you get that right time and right moment, and you have that intuition as a coach and say, this is the time to do it, which is really cool. And I think, I've been on both sides of those type of cool and not so cool moments of coaching and also playing. And it's the drama and the effect. And I think that's why you practice. That's why you rep that. And you have to give credit to the players too. They know it's coming, and to execute at a high level, and for the kicker who's never really attempted a rush to go down there and get it all the way down to 2 and not fumble. Those plays can also go bad. And you see it all across college football, but that was right place, right time, and kudos to them.
And Duke had tried a trick play on a previous fourth down. It didn't work. So to have the guts to come back with it, certainly in the press box, we're often talking about, like, oh, what do you do here? What's going on? You think they'll fake it? Never came up. Just everyone assumed they were going to try to kick. But you pointed out something that why maybe Carolina should have been on the alert for a fake.
Yeah, I think, going into the game when I was doing my research on the opponent, Duke's kicker was only 62% for the entire year and battled for his job. And that was a critical thing in the early part of the first quarter of the season, was who's Duke's kicker. He kind of missed some kicks. There was inconsistencies. There was a lot of media reports on who that guy was going to be. And so going into the game, I was like, okay, well, they've went for it a lot on fourth down. Even the previous games, I think they were like 11 of 11, even after Carolina game, going 5 of 6 on go for it on fourth down. So they've had a tendency to not rely on the kicker. So why not let him kick it? I mean, in my opinion. But look, when you're in the heat of the game, you want to try to make a play. And I think the one that kind of, I think everyone's pointing out, is the roughing the kicker one that gave them a free first down and 7 points. And I think that's just something that's part of the game and part of a game plan. But going in there, I really was not confident in their kicking abilities. And I thought on paper, we had the advantage.
You talked about the penalty on Marcus Allen. The roughing the kicker resulted in 7 points. Sometimes that it's an effort play, right? You probably you don't want to rough the kicker, obviously. But I thought the maybe the more costly penalty for Carolina, this is a team that didn't commit a lot of penalties during the first half of the season, has committed more as of late, was the ineligible receiver downfield late in the first half. You would have had Carolina had 1st and goal. That gets pulled back. They end up having to kick the field goal. It may have cost you 4 points. Maybe it didn't cost you any points, but it looked like it might have cost you 4 points. And you've been a coach, you've been a player. When you get a penalty like that, that's just somebody lined up wrong, right? Somebody covered the tight end up.
Yeah, I think we were outcoached in situational football, and in a lot of different areas throughout the game. But that was my critical, blunder of the game, because it's a self-inflicted wound. And Brian, I've talked about this even on a couple of different podcasts. But so that's something that basically 3 people can be in charge of seeing the incorrect formation, right? My job as a quarterback when I was playing was our guys would be first. So the first 11, when we broke the huddle, I had to make sure everybody was lined up. And on that play specifically, Javarius Green was on the ball as a slot receiver, and we had a motion coming over, and that was by ship. And so immediately, the tight end's covered up. So there's a couple ways that this could have been prevented. Gio could have told Javarius, hey, man, get off the ball, because that's his job as the quarterback to know where everybody is. The receiver coach on the sideline could have been like, hey, man, get off the ball, which you see a lot. He could have asked the ref, hey, am I good? Because usually the ref kind of gives you that, hey, you're on the ball or off the ball, and they'll give you a little leeway of who's on and who's off.
And by off the ball, explain what you mean by off the ball.
Yeah, so in order, the last person in the line of scrimmage can't not cover up the person on the ball. So there's really the line of scrimmage, and then there's guys on the ball and off the ball. So you can't be the last guy to cover them up. So you have to be off the ball. And so that's what happened here is Javarius Green covered up the tight end, which means there's two guys on the line of scrimmage right next to each other. So one of them can't be an eligible receiver. So that means that the tight end was ineligible going down the field. And it's really tough in the heat of the moment to know that, but it's kind of like ingrained in your brain as a quarterback to make sure we're lined up. And also you can call timeout. Hey, freeze, this doesn't look good. Let's call a timeout. There's one thing that we always knew as a quarterback, where if you even had a motion, you could be freeze and say, hey, look, get off the ball. Everybody stop for a second to get reset, and then you snap it. So there's that was really frustrating for me because it's week 11. And I think that was one of those things where it was such a critical time in the game. And Gio threw a great ball to the sideline. He gets Kobe, and we're down at the 4 with a shot in the red zone and to finish a drive, and we have to end up with 3. And it was costly because they might have had to go for it on the fake field goal, and you don't know if they get it. So little things like that, and you can always go back and say, but there's one play, but there was like 4 or 5, especially with the penalties that really cost us in this game.
Some of the penalties seem like rivalry penalties, right? Someone hit somebody in the face. Now the Duke guy was certainly holding on to him, and I get why he would be angry. I'm not going to say that I would have reacted, in a good manner on something like that. He had another one where just the tackler, the defender didn't stop and just kind of carried the guy into the stands. I mean, there were penalties that I think felt like, at least as an observer, born out of sort of that rivalry and that intensity.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of emotional, competitive lack of composure from Carolina. And I call that, emotional, competitive composure because that's been told to me before. These games are going to be chippy. Antagonizing is going to happen from both sides. If you don't respond, I think for me, frustrating thing, Brian, was the open fist to the face. Like, that's going to be a flag. And the refs always told us before the game. Like, I was a captain for 4 years, and they always, when we went to the coin toss, they say, hey guys, we're going to be calling it close, so don't even think about it, because the first one's going to get thrown and you're going to cost your team. And we ended up getting 3 of those, and at costly times. And we're not an offense that can go and score and make up that ground. That's just not us. And so I think for me is we lost the emotional maturity battle, and I think that starts with the coaches. I think it starts with the players, because you have to have a hyper sense of awareness. We always knew it was going to be chippy. It was chippy on the opening kickoff. Those guys had to be separated. Like, they're coming, that's going to happen, but the cooler heads prevail, and we lost that emotional regularity. Like, they had one personal foul, and it was down the red zone and backed them up, and they had to kick a field goal, and that's when we got the roughing the kicker. Right. So they got one, it backed them up. We get a roughing the kicker, they score the next play. And so, like, you look at those turn of events of those personal fouls were costly, and they may not be like, in the heat of the moment, we'll come back and get it, but that's 15 yards and a free first down. And we just didn't look like we had any composure throughout the game, and nothing was really done. And I think that's frustrating for me, because it's week 11 and that's going to happen. And you got to coach your team up to say, look, we cannot stand for these penalties, especially the hands to the face ones. Like, they're going to call those every time. Everybody gets a push. But you also know the refs are going to let 20 seconds go and you can get your shots in, and let it be verbal. Like, you still have 4 quarters of the game, and you're not focused on your play if you're focused on hitting the other team in the face. It's not football at that point. You're playing, go do UFC or something like that, but you can't cost your team in those moments.
And this game was at home. Next week, the game's going to be even chippier. Let's be honest, and it's going to be a hostile environment. The entire crowd's going to be against you, 65,000 at Carter Finley Stadium. If you can't keep your composure in a game like this at home, what's it going to be like next week? And you played in this game 4 times.
Yeah, that place is I'm going to call it Raleigh, but Raleigh is just it's a hyperly aggressive stadium. It's one of the hardest environments I've played in on the road. And even my senior year, that was my last game because I got hurt. They were cheering because I got hurt, so I respect them. It's a fun game to be in. You respect the competitiveness, but going back to the chippiness, like they've seen it for 2 weeks. Wake got under our skin and Duke got under her skin, and you sure as heck know that that team in Raleigh is going to do the same thing because they see it on film. So how are you going to respond? And I think that was, you take the fun out of the game when you get personal fouls. You want it to be competitive through the whistles, like this game was, and not make those mistakes to cost your team. So it's going to even be more electric at 7:30 at night on Thanksgiving weekend in Raleigh. And so you have to prepare your team, especially 18 and 22-year-old kids. And in the NFL, you don't have to do that. Like, I don't think there's one game that I was like in the NFL and I was like, okay, well, it's going to be, hostile. And I maybe, when I was with the Ravens and we were playing all those division teams, but it's a different atmosphere when it's college kids. And they're also, it's a highly emotional game, and nothing compares to the Duke UNC rivalry, but also just 10x more is the State Carolina rivalry. So we'll see how it goes.
I asked Will Hardy about this week, and he's a player, so he had to give a diplomatic answer. But I was trying to get him to explain to me what's the difference between the Duke rivalry and the NC State rivalry. Like, do they feel the same? I know they're both rivals, but it just feels like the NC State game, at least as an outsider, means a lot more. And as a player, like, how do you balance that? Probably not an answer you could give before the Duke game, but you're a guy who's lived it. And what's the difference between those two games?
Yeah, unfortunately, they are different. I think everyone knows that. We all know that. There's a little bit the Duke rivalry is more of a hatred, and the state rivalry is just more of like you cannot stand that other person that's in the room. Like you can't be associated with them. So it's like, hey, the other person's cordial and you can just be in the room with them. The other one is I have to get out of here. And so I think it's just more of it's been more of a competition. I don't mean that disrespectfully, but there's a longevity of competition in games. And I got sent to me this morning, Brian, when the coach from North Carolina picked up the offensive coordinator and tackled him and there was like this huge melee. I got that sent to me by all the Carolina fans. And no matter if we're 4-7, 2-5 in the ACC, it doesn't matter. This is the one game that does matter. And I hope everyone in the building understands that. And I think, it's very fun to compete in these. And I had a blast. We had the Gio punt return. And then my senior year, we beat them on their field. And those are memories that I'll never forget. And I think that's one thing that you respect each opponent. I respect Duke and respect State. And that's that 1 week where the competitor comes out and you really make plays. And I think that's what you saw in the Duke game. There was like Carolina played better than they have all season, in my opinion. Duke played pretty well, and it came down to those final moments. And that's what these rivalry games provide, is that sense of high sports, high competitive nature.
Let's talk a little bit about how Carolina did play, because I thought Gio Lopez had his best game of the year. We've had a lot of negative things to say about Gio, not just not myself, but the fan base at large. I thought he showed incredible toughness in that game. Took a ton of big hits, kept getting up, and kept delivering passes. A lot of them were to the left. Is something we've talked about a lot. He threw a lot of balls to the left, but they kind of schemed for him that way. And I thought Gio was really good. Maybe the guy that Carolina thought they were getting when they got him out of the transfer portal.
Yeah, he was he was a gritty player. They blitzed him entirely from his blind side the entire game. They wanted to come after his blind side, which is his right. And when he turned his back, they were coming after him. And a really good defensive line. Even on film, they showed great athleticism, and they were hitting him, right at the right time when he was delivering the ball. And like you said, I thought he played his best game. And he gave us a chance to win. And really, I thought Jordan Shipp and even Kobe Paysour made some great catches, and those were great plays by them. And I think we wish we would have seen that more from Gio throughout the season. But he played well enough to win. And I think the rushing touchdown in the first drive, and then 15 points in the third quarter was great. But Brian, not to be the negative guy again, but you look at those two drives he has late, and it goes sack, holding, punt. Then you get sack, incomplete, and we don't move the ball yard. And it's like, you wish the throwing progression and the quarterback intellect would have shown up a little bit more throughout the year and in those critical moments, because you got those drives and you got to get the ball to your hands. But for the most part, he played really well and gave us a chance to win.
Yeah, that first drive was really critical, right? Carolina gets the stop on the 4th down trick play that Duke runs. Oh, you got to pick up a couple first downs. You got to bleed the clock. And I think they had a short running play and then sack, and all of a sudden those were the first sacks Duke had all game.
Yeah.
They finally got there, and you wonder, how much is that on the quarterback? How much is on O-line? How much is that on the coaching staff? And you just at a critical time where Carolina really needed to pick up a couple of first downs of 4 minutes, right? You trying to bleed the clock out. They just were unable to do it. The question I would ask you, on the other side, Mensah, obviously a very good quarterback, did not play that great. I thought Carolina's defense played well, but that pressure that Carolina's been able to get against most teams didn't show up. I think they had 1 sack, but they just were unable to get to Mensah and really, so Duke was able to go for it on 4th down 6 times because they were in decent situations. They picked up the 4th and super long. Mensah scrambles, I think, for 16 yards. So it just felt like when the defense needed to make a play, when that D line that you've been counting on all year needed to make a play, they just didn't.
Yeah, you're completely right. And I think it was one of those games where, look, I think Mensah's by far and away the best quarterback in the ACC that we've seen, but Shepard has to get a ton of credit because that kid is an unbelievable freshman. And he's a great running back. And those 2 guys, and even Hazley and Barkey, they have really 4 guys that were threats. And if you look at Mensah's game, I know he didn't have the stats. He didn't throw for 300. He's thrown for 300 almost every single game, at least the last 3. He made maturity and poised plays to keep them in it. And I was really impressed with his escapability to throw the ball away when we did get pressure, but we didn't get sacked and he didn't allow negative plays to happen. And I think that's what was really cool to see from his game in the elevation of sometimes at quarterback, it's not going to be a 300-yard day. It's going to be one of those games where let's keep it in this, let's run the ball, let's be effective. And he did that. And I think for Carolina to not have any sacks, that was really something we were missing to get off the field, right? Like we had those long drives and they just stayed on the field because we couldn't get them off. And it's gut-wrenching when a team goes 5 of 6 on 4th down. And most of those 4th downs were 4th and 1, 4th and 3 within 5 yards. And I thought Anderson Castle did a really good job picking those up because that kid's a really good player as well. Duke had weapons, and they've shown they can score points all year. Carolina did a good job of limiting the points, but just couldn't get them off the field because the time of possession was just so lopsided as well.
Manny Diaz, 4-0 against North Carolina and North Carolina State. So he's doing a heck of a job over there at Duke. I want to get your expert opinion on another quarterback, and that's CJ Bailey, the guy that Carolina's going to have to stop next week. He's been a little more up and down than Mensah, who I think's been a little steadier, but the flash plays from Bailey are as good as anybody, across the ACC at least, when he makes those plays, either with his legs or with his arm.
Yeah, I think CJ's a really good player. And I think he has those games where you're like, wow. And then he has some games where you're like, oh, man, the accuracy wasn't there. But he is a threat to score at any moment. With his legs, I think he's done a good job of being the point guard and not taking as many hits this year. I think that's different. He's choosing to run a lot more, a lot less and getting the ball out of his hands. But you look how he played against Florida State. That was the first game I've watched in a couple of weeks, actually, since they played Duke. And he's improved. He got the ball out of his hands, but their running game is something that I saw when I was watching Florida State that was hard to stop. I mean, they brought the Wilson kid in, I believe, on those short yardage situations. That's a 2-quarterback system, and they got it every single time. So that's something that Carolina's going to have to prepare for. And they have weapons. I mean, they have guys that can really, really go, and I know they're going to be ready. They have an extra day of rest. I know how Coach Doran coached. I played against Coach Doran. He is a one tough son of a gun, and he's a really good football coach. And I know when he says baby blue, and I feel it in my heart. I'm like, man, I want to go play again because it's such a great time to be in this rivalry. Like, I miss it. I miss those battles because he coaches his team really, really hard for this week, and I've always respected him and how he does that. So I know CJ Bailey and the guys are going to be ready.
Yeah, I mean, just the sheer number of skill guys they have between Hollywood Smothers and Duke Scott and Joe Lee, the tight end, and all those receivers, Rogers and Anderson, and they just seem to find a new guy every game. The State's offense is very impressive, and their defense played probably its best game against Florida State. I asked Bill Belichick after the game. I said, "Look, in your initial press conference, you mentioned Duke. Little Billy's first words were beat Duke. You've talked about the Duke rivalry many times, but you haven't talked a ton about state. Like, has that sort of been impressed upon you that the state rivalry may be even bigger? He said, look, I'm not real smart, but I learned that pretty quick. I understand the rivalry. If you've never look, he's a very smart dude. He knows more about football than I'll ever know. Can you be prepared for the intensity of this rivalry, like that first time you walk into Carter Finley?
Yeah, with all due respect, I don't know if I agree with that response. I think the response should be, I'm going to get my team as prepared as I can, because when you step into Carter Finley, it's a different atmosphere. College football is different than the NFL, and you're coaching 18 and 22-year-old kids that need to be motivated, that need to be told this is the biggest game of their careers. And we have 61 guys that aren't from the state on the team. And so that really kind of, it fires me up, because I think people need to know, look, you didn't do it against Duke, you better do it against State, and there better be some people in the locker room that know what this is all about, because that interlocking NC means a lot to alumni, fans, and everybody in this game means a lot. And so if he didn't say it, I'll say it. This is a really important game for our program. It is every single year, and should be the most important game on the schedule. And you got to go in and tell your team how important that is, what the rivalry means, what has been done in the past. There's different situations. I mean, that can arise from these games. And so that's what makes sports great, is you have to coach your team up to understand that there's going to be critical moments in this game, because we weren't critically ready for the personal fouls that we had, to be very overly critical. So I think we got outcoached in situational football, and I hope it doesn't happen again on Saturday.
Yeah, one thing Dave Doran has always done is get that team ready to play in this game. I mean, they've won 4 in a row. I don't know how he does it necessarily, but he makes this game, he's able to elevate this game in a way that is healthy, I think. And maybe at the end of the Mac Brown era, Carolina just wasn't able to get to that same heights as State has been in these games.
Yeah, I'll give you a great story. So I go back to, we lost to him 5 years in a row. And it was Larry's first year of the rivalry. And we came off a loss, and we go to our lockers on Sunday morning, and there is Party City red everywhere in the locker room. And we lost. We're coming off a loss, and we're playing State. And we hadn't beat them in a long time. And Larry Fedora sent a message, because he painted our cleats. He put red streamers in our lockers. It was balloons. And so we're getting done with our lift, and we go in the locker room, and it's like all this red. And I'll never forget, every single guy was taking the crap down. He made a statement, and it pissed us off. And we ended up playing one of the coolest games that I've ever been a part of, a very competitive game. Mike Glennon actually was a Virginia guy as well. We played against each other in high school. And so Mike and I had a battle throwing the ball, and we both had a really good games. And Gio, they punted to Gio. Tom O'Brien punted to Gio and returned it down the sideline, and it was game over. So that's how people get motivated for a rivalry game, because it helps kids understand the magnitude of it. So I think that was something cool. But Coach Doran always does a great job of providing importance. I mean, he said it in his press conference, and that trickles down to the team. It really does. And so I think that's the mentality and mode that they've always had. And I think we've kind of been, I think we've always competed, but you got to have guys in the locker room with a sense of urgency to understand and speak on how much this means.
Yeah, great stuff. Let's end with this. The transfer portal doesn't open until January, but you're certainly around college football enough to know. My sense is that there's going to be kids in that portal maybe as soon as this game ends against NC State, probably on both sides, but specifically for North Carolina. As soon as this game's over, people are going to be making their decisions about the portal, even if it doesn't open for a couple more weeks. This month of December just feels like it's critically important for the entire Bill Belichick era.
Yeah, in my opinion, Brian, I'm actually thankful we didn't make a bowl game, because we need to do a ton of work in the offseason and have really critical conversations with guys on our team that we want to retain, guys on our team that are no longer going to be there, and guys that have to make personal decisions. And I think for me, it's one of those times where it's good to have an offseason for Coach Belichick. It's going to be good for Mike Lombardi to have an offseason to evaluate their roster, kind of, and have a reevaluation process for what went right and what went wrong from a personnel standpoint, and not have a game looming to go prepare for and to go play. And you can kind of focus on who needs to be here and who's not. And I said this last night, and I truly mean this. I think in this day and age, in this modern football, and I get it. I get the value of money. I get the you need to be paid for play and things like that. But I think you want guys that want to be here as the most important thing, and you really have to have serious conversations. So if guys on our team, and this is just me personally, I'm not speaking for anybody else, but if I was the quarterback and we actually had this happen when we got bowl banned and could not play in the ACC title game in 2012, you have to have a closed door meeting of players only. And you have to really, kind of check your friends and check your peers of, do you want to be here? Because people are going to look for the shiniest thing out there, and it might be not be the best opportunity. So I'll never forget, we had a closed door meeting in 2012 when people could leave, and there was a lot of distractions before the season when Bubba Cunningham said that we couldn't go to a bowl game. We had a players only meeting and said, if you don't want to be here, then get out, because this place means a lot to everybody, and we're going to finish the deal. And we went 8-4, won the ACC Coastal Division, but couldn't play Florida State. But right then and there is a team that was committed. And I think for players, you have to feel the same way. If you're coming back and being a part of this team, we want you to be here. But if you're 1 foot out the door, don't even come back. And I think that's something that players can do. I think coaches can have hard conversations with kids on where they see them fitting. And it's turned into NFL football. So if you want to go to the NFL, you might as well start when you're 19 years old and say, look, this is the type of business conversations that you're going to have at the next level if you get a chance to get there. So interesting offseason for UNC, and a lot of things have to change.
He's Bryn Renner. I'm Brian Murphy. Thank you so much for listening. Bryn, appreciate the time all season. We'll talk one more time after the NC State game, but I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. And will you be in attendance? So you're gonna brave all that red over there in Raleigh?
Brian, I will never go to Raleigh ever unless I'm going to RDU and taking a flight away from Raleigh. And that's so the guys teased me. They're like, are you going to go to Raleigh, or, can you do the Raleigh game? I'm like, nope, you better get somebody else. That's a bad decision for me personally. I don't want to end up in jail. So I wish Carolina the best. I will never go to a game at State ever. So that's how much I love the rivalry, though, Brian. They won't let me come back. I'm never going to Carter Finley ever.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. All the listeners, thank you so much for listening all season, and I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving as well. And we'll see you next week.